You know, American political history has some pretty wild stories, but this one, it's really something else. We're talking scandal, a crushing defeat, and a presidential comeback that's literally never happened since. So let's dive right in. Okay, so here's the question you might have wondered about, especially with how politics are these days. Can a U.S. president serve a term, lose their reelection, and then just come back 4 years later and win again? I mean, is that even allowed? Well, the answer is yes. But you might be surprised to learn it's only ever happened just once. That's it. Think about that. In almost 2.5 centuries of American history, only a single person has managed to pull this off. It's a one-of-a-kind political feat. And that man was Grover Cleveland. Yup. Because he served 2 terms that weren't back-to-back, he gets this weird honor of being both the 22nd and the 24th president. It's a great little trivia question, right? So how in the world did you actually manage to do it? All right, to understand this, we've got to go back in time. Cleveland's whole story really plays out across 3 huge elections during the Gilded Age. Now, this was a time of massive economic change and some really fierce political fighting. And each of these elections, completely different from the last. And you can really see just how different they were here. The 1884 election, man, that was all about character. It was pure mudslinging. You had Cleveland, this reform-minded Democrat, going up against James G. Blaine, a Republican who was seen as so corrupt that even some of his own party members, called mugwumps, couldn't stand him. So what do the Republicans do? They dig up some personal dirt, claiming Cleveland fathered a child out of wedlock, and they start chanting "Ma, Ma, where's my pa?" at his rallies. Seriously. But then, fast forward just 4 years, and the whole conversation flips. Suddenly, it's a battle of policy. The big issue becomes Cleveland's idea to lower these super high protective tariffs, which were basically taxes that helped big American businesses. So how did Cleveland handle that crazy personal scandal? He basically owned it. He admitted it was possible he was the father, and his supporters just ran with it, arguing that, hey, personal mistakes are one thing, but public corruption is way worse. And it worked. He won a nail-biter of an election. And his supporters, they got the ultimate last laugh by taking that Republican chant and turning it right back on them with this amazing comeback. But here's where it gets interesting. In 1888, even though those big business interests hated his ideas on tariffs, Cleveland still won the popular vote. You can see it right here. More individual Americans cast their ballot for him than for his opponent, Benjamin Harrison. But, as we all know, that's not how it works. Harrison won the Electoral College, and Cleveland was out. He became one of only a handful of candidates in all of U.S. history to win the popular vote, but lose the presidency. For pretty much anyone else, that would have been it. Game over. But not for Grover Cleveland, no. This defeat was actually just setting the stage for one of the greatest comebacks in political history. And check this out. As the Clevelands were literally packing their bags and leaving the White House, his wife, Frances, turned to the staff and said this. I mean, can you imagine the confidence? She was basically telling them, don't change the drapes, we'll be back in 4 years. And you know what? She was absolutely right. Sure enough, 4 years go by. The country isn't too happy with Harrison's policies. And who steps up for a rematch? Grover Cleveland. And this time, it wasn't even close. He won a decisive victory, cementing his unique place in the history books as the only president to ever return to office after being defeated. But here's the thing. The 2 terms he served were like night and day. You can see it here. His first term was all about being the reformer, the anti-corruption guy. He fought special interests so hard and vetoed so many bills that they literally nicknamed him the veto president. But that second term, wow, it was a complete trial by fire. He got hit with the Panic of 1893, which was one of the worst economic depressions the country had ever seen, plus all this violent labor unrest, like the huge Pullman strike. So that brings up a big question. Why is he still the only one? Why hasn't anyone else done this? Well, the reason has less to do with political skill and more to do with a huge change that was made to the Constitution itself. See, for most of American history, serving only 2 terms was just a tradition. It was something George Washington did, and everyone else just kind of followed his lead. But it wasn't a rule. There was no law. That is, until Franklin D. Roosevelt came along. During the absolute chaos of the Great Depression and World War II, FDR got elected to a 3rd term, and then a 4th. And that really shook things up, leading to a pretty big political backlash. So, in response to FDR, the country passed the 22nd Amendment in 1951. And here's the key part. It says no person can be elected to the office of president more than twice. So, yeah, a one-term president could still try to pull a Cleveland, but someone who has already served 2 terms, they can't ever run again. And that simple rule is a huge reason why Grover Cleveland's story is, and likely will remain, totally unique. But look, his legacy isn't just about being a trivia answer. It's really about what the man stood for. What were the principles that guided him, especially when he was governing in an age that was just filled with corruption? This quote right here really nails his whole philosophy. Cleveland was a firm believer in a small federal government and what you might call rugged individualism. I mean, he famously vetoed a bill that would have sent federal money to farmers who were suffering from a terrible drought. His reasoning was that while people should definitely help each other out, it just wasn't the government's job to hand out aid. And that's why people saw him as this incorruptible figure. He shot down bills that only helped special interests. He went head-to-head with his own party over economic policy. He just stood on principle no matter what. He built this reputation for being stubbornly, almost impossibly honest. And that idea, doing what you believe is right and not worrying about the political consequences, that was really the story of his entire career. So, that really leaves us with something to think about. Cleveland once said that to do his job the right way, henceforth I must have no friends. What he meant was he couldn't let personal relationships or party loyalty get in the way of his decisions. So in our own politically divided era, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What's the real value? And maybe, what's the real cost of a leader who puts principle above everything and everyone else?